Hello, everyone. Welcome to our instructional design seminar. My name is Yurchenkov. I am the manager of instructional design here at the University of Massachusetts Amherst. We are really excited to have you here. Thank you so much for joining for this first event. We have some impressive numbers. We have more than 700 people who joined us today, who represent different countries like the United States, Canada, South Africa, Saudi Arabia, France, Switzerland, more than 100 institutions from the United States. So we are glad that you decided to join our event today, and hopefully you will enjoy today's seminar. Before we start discussing our topic, let me first describe you what is the seminar. Well, at the University of Massachusetts, we strongly believe that we need to provide highly effective, engaging education to all our students to change their lives. And that is why we need to make sure that all our educators use the latest learning technologies and learning strategies. And that is why we believe that the seminar, which is a series of development events where we feature industry experts, with these events, we can empower educators and instructional designers with innovative teaching practices. And with this event, we'd like to provide educators and instructional designers with innovative tools, learning strategies, and best course design practices, as well as it is really a great opportunity for our faculty and for all other industry experts to share their best practices and inspire and connect educators nationwide. With our seminar event, we're also really excited to launch another project that is really useful for all educators and learning leaders. We call this project EdTech Ideas Digest. It is a comprehensive resource for educators and learning leaders to inspire, inform, and elevate their education practices. This is the fully online, monthly updated resource with 3 core categories: trends, where you can find data-driven insights into global trends and in education and skills development; best practices and tools, where you will be able to find practical advice through checklists, frameworks, and actionable recommendations to make learning more engaging and effective; and of course, point of view. This is the fresh perspectives from thought leaders in the educational industry. You can scan the QR code on the slide to be able to access our resource, and we hope you will like that resource. And also, all participants of this seminar who sign up for the seminar and who mentioned that they'd like to receive emails from us, they will receive monthly updates from this resource as well. Some short instructions for our event today. The seminar will be recorded, and you will definitely receive the key takeaways and the recording for this event, as well as if you'd like to ask any questions. I know that most of you watch this seminar through the instructional design website at the University of Massachusetts, but if you click on the title of this YouTube player, the new YouTube page will open on your screen, and you can use chat. But you probably need to use your Gmail address, because I know that sometimes institutions limit educators' ability to use YouTube. So if you would like to send comments and questions, please use your personal email address. All right, now the topic of our seminar, beyond the classroom, creating engaging educational videos. When we started this, thinking about the topic for the seminar, we decided that the video creating engaging educational videos should be the first one, because video is one of the best formats for providing content to students. And a couple of research proves that. We analyzed 2 research reports, one from Camtasia and another one from Panopta. And basically, the report state that 85% students say video technology enhances learning. 83% prefer to consume instructional and informational content by watching a video. 84% watch course-related videos at least once per week. And 60% of students say that videos help to reinforce learning or difficult concepts. And other reports also highlight video over other formats like text-based content and podcasts. And also, we all know that there are different video types and video formats that we can use in our online courses. And first, we'd like to ask you, which emerging video formats are you most likely to use in your teaching or you're using now. So if you can please take your devices and scan this QR code that you can see on the screen now and answer the question. You can choose up to five options, and then we will compare the results with the research report. The only one thing that I'd like to say that I know that we have so many participants now, so if you can scan the code, choose the options and leave the app so other people can join, because I know that the app has limits of 100 participants. So it will be great if you can choose options quickly. I'll give some time and then we will see the results on the screen. Once again, just scan the QR code on the screen. You will see the app. We call it Slido. You can choose up to 5 options. And I think I will ask my team to share the results on the screen. All right. So as we can see here, 34% of people mentioned that interactive videos, they're using interactive videos. And you can also scroll up a bit so I can see all the results. Thank you so much. So 76% of our audience, they use instructional videos for course models. 69% recorded or on-demand lecture videos. 54% supplemental videos as a part of curriculum. 35 as interactive videos, 26 YouTube for self-directed learning, and it seems like 22% student-created video submissions. Let's go back to our slides. Thank you so much for your participation. Let's go back to our slides and see the results from the research report. And it seems like 54% use recorded on-demand lecture videos, 52 use YouTube for self-directed learning. We have some different results here from what our audience mentioned and what the research report shows. And it's really fascinating and excited to see that the numbers are a bit different, but also I'm glad to see that so many of you use different formats in your classes. So it's really great. Another thing that I'd like to mention during this introduction is that it's really important to understand that when you develop videos, it's not only about the technology, it's not only about the high quality camera or the microphone, but it's also about methodology. And during our seminar, we are going to focus on methodology, and we will discuss what emerging video trends will shape education in 2025, what reasons can stop people from viewing a video, how can we minimize cognitive overload when creating educational videos, especially for complex topics, as well as how can storytelling be leveraged to enhance video-based learning. And to answer those questions, we invited four speakers. Let me introduce them to you. Dr. Richard Mayer, Distinguished Professor of Psychology at the University of California, Santa Barbara. Matthew Pierce, Learning and Video Ambassador at TechSmith. Koby Leff, Animation Specialist at Instructional Design Engagement and Support Group at the University of Massachusetts Amherst. And Forrest Bowlick, Senior Lecturer, Earth Geographic and Climate Scientist at UMass Amherst. Thank you so much to all our speakers who joined us today, and thank you for being able to answer our questions during today's event. And we will start with first 15 minutes, we will start with a small and short panel discussion. And the first question that I'd like to ask to Matt, can you briefly tell us what emerging video trends will shape education in 2025 based on your experience?
Yeah, well, thank you so much. And I am so grateful to be here with these other distinguished panelists. And, it's interesting. I'm not coming from an academic background here in terms of what the work that I do on a day-to-day basis. So I want that to be a framework for everybody as you're working in academia, as you're working in education. My viewpoint might be a little different, but I see a couple things because I am out at a lot of industry events and I'm talking to people who are in industry working. And there's a couple of trends that I see. One, obviously, everyone's talking about AI and the impact that it will have. And I think there's always risk there, things we need to be careful about. But I do think it's going to be an enabler. I had someone say to me recently that it's a fast start. So as you think about the opportunities that are available to get from concept or idea or thing that's in your lecture to video, there's going to be things that are going to be enabling in that. It doesn't mean it's all good, doesn't mean it's all best practice, but like what it's going to do is hopefully help us move forward. I also see that it's interesting because we've done our own research and kind of looked at preferences for videos, and I know this will come up later, is that I think we're seeing this appetite for people want the right information at the right time. And I used to tell people 3 to 4 minutes is the longest video you should make. I don't think that's necessarily true anymore. I think we see some appetite for longer video because people really, what they want is they want good depth. They want to be able to, not have to just go find all the pieces and put it together. They want to see the information come together. But I do think there's still going to be that space for what we'll call social media style videos. If you think about the consumption trends, how many more people are watching short form vertical video like YouTube Shorts, TikTok, Instagram, now even LinkedIn has gone kind of big onto video as a platform. And again, it's not for every situation, but I do think there's a lot of learning that is happening in those spaces. And something like it's not really a trend for 2025, it's a continuation, is we see a lot of people who are creatives creating content, they're on YouTube or whatever, who are now starting to get serious about learning. And they could benefit from people like Dr. Mayer and others who are teaching these great principles, but they're really focused on making high quality content that looks good, sounds good, but also is impactful. You can actually dig into and learn from.
Thank you so much. Koby, would you like to add anything?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a really great assessment. I guess I'll go back and touch on AI for another moment. I think that it's at its best, especially in the classroom, when we see it as this. I like it as you put it, Matt. This startup tool, basically, this democratizing way of allowing people who aren't super tech savvy to dip their feet in a little bit. I definitely, especially because our students are going to become. I think are already and in some ways becoming increasingly skeptical of AI use, and we want to make sure we're forming human connections, especially due to the barriers of an online class, the ways that connection isn't inherently built in. So I think when we can use those AI tools to help us brainstorm in the back end, maybe give script suggestions. If I'm trying to shorten a video, sometimes I will run it through an AI program and ask, like at the script level and ask, hey, is there any place it seems redundant? And that way it's still, I think, whenever possible, if it's our work, and like on an image and video level, I think things we pull from Creative Commons that were created by a human source will always feel more authentic to our students, at least I think in this moment in time with all of the ethics questions around AI.
Thank you so much. Richard, do you want to add anything?
Of course. Hi, everyone. It's great to be here, and I appreciate being invited to be on this panel. I'm coming kind of from the perspective of applying the science of learning to education. And I certainly agree. We're all in the field of educational psychology, all talking about AI. How is that going to affect education? And we all see it. It's going to have a tremendous impact. We just don't exactly know how it's going to shake out yet. So I certainly agree with the focus on AI. Just to keep us humble, I would point out that more than 100 years ago, Thomas Edison, who developed motion pictures, claimed that motion pictures are going to revolutionize education. They're going to replace textbooks. Everything's going to be based on showing movies. But we can see that didn't exactly happen. And I think it didn't happen because people took more of a technology-centered approach to it rather than a learner-centered approach. And so what I've been trying to do is figure out how is the research that will tell us how to design effective videos, videos that, for example, would motivate people to want to understand what's being presented, because it's a kind of passive medium. I mean, we can do things to it, but how can we get it to motivate people? Sometimes the material is complicated, so how can we manage the complexity of the information? And also, it can be distracting, so how can we kind of minimize the distraction? So those are some of the issues I've been thinking about in terms of trends.
Can I just share? I thank you, Dr. Mary, and I agree. I think that relevance to like an individual, whatever is being put out there to be consumed, is so important, right? Like that makes or breaks, I think, for a lot of people. If it doesn't feel relevant to me, like why? And I'll talk. I have some of this in my presentation, so I guess maybe I'm getting ahead of myself. But it feels like that's a key, right? Because that humanity, I want it to feel like it's good information that I can use, whether that's to pass a course or to be able to do a job function or to progress in whatever way. So I do think that's really key. And you're absolutely right about TV didn't, Edison's movies didn't replace it. Radio sure didn't replace it in the 50s and 60s. There were sure a lot of attempts, but I think AI is there, that it will be, hopefully what it turns into is really a great lift to make it us more capable to be able to get that great relevant information to our audiences.
Right. It's a chance to individualize instruction for people. It's kind of a dream we've had for a long time, but now it's real.
We just should use it wisely, right? I mean, AI can definitely help us to save a lot of time when we produce videos, when we create content, but at the same time, we don't have to rely solely on AI. So that's a key, I think, message here.
Yeah, I think
Forrest,
I think that's the
And I
key
think that's
point.
actually
I think that's exactly the key point that we should work on emphasizing. In my work, I'm a geographer. I do geographic information science. Ask your favorite generative AI image tool sometime to make a map for you. It will be the worst map you have ever seen, possibly for now until the end of time, certainly before time. So there are places where these kind of generative AI things are entirely inappropriate, and we need to start working to understand when that is happening. There is a lot of generative AI video nonsense out there that I think we can still see the uncanny valley, maybe, or maybe it's just because it's so bad and people have 27 fingers and what else. We can sense that. We can build that out. But I'm much more interested in making like Creative Commons videos, or videos that, and those were mentioned earlier, videos that are open source, videos that are accessible to people with as low of a barrier as possible, so that we can then build those and share those and build community around those. There's plenty of good AI tools out there for like summarizing text. I'm sure there's some good ones out there for editing and stuff. And that let's keep those in that kind of safe place, rather than if I asked generative AI to do any kind of video work for my course, it would be a magnificent disaster, and we'd all have a good time laughing at it. And then I'd have to get back in the classroom and actually teach it.
Thank you so much. Another question that I'd like you to kind of to answer is, what are key educational video types should we consider to enrich our courses? Forrest, how about you?
Yeah, so I'm happy to continue on that. One of the things that I think are important is just building the videos that the students are going to be using, and that requires us to know a lot about how our students are living and learning in the current times. That, of course, changes all the time. If I asked my students right now to listen to a radio program, it would not go over well. I can't even make Simpsons references anymore. Those don't go over anymore either. So I think it's, and we mentioned some of the short form stuff, kind of, when LinkedIn put up a video page, I was just like, that's an interesting way of delivering business news that I didn't think of. So it's meeting the students where they are. For my students, it's a lot of direct, clear walkthrough type videos that they really appreciate. Things that they can put into immediate action are things that they really like. So it depends on the context of the course and what they're learning too. So building up a video library of kind of useful things is the best service I think we can do right now.
Thank you so much.
Building off of that, I want to kind of tie that back to this idea of, we want to be thinking about when and why we're using AI. I think that's true about video in general. I think especially in our online course offerings, we want to resist this temptation to make everything a video when it could be an article we're sending sometimes, or even if it could be a pre-existing video, maybe we're sending a YouTube link rather than reinventing the wheel. I think the more intentional and focused, like all of the scenarios you're mentioning in your classes, Forrest, like the more our students can see, and as you were saying a minute before, Dr. Mayer as well, like, oh, this is relevant to me. I know why this isn't being presented. I'm not getting the sense that my professor was just told, hey, videos are great. They were like really thinking about it. And then I think to kind of speak more specifically to video types, in my instructional design video work here at UMass, we've sort of been putting like scripted videos into 3 buckets, and later during this presentation we'll hear about some unscripted video options from Forrest, which are also great. But I think in terms of scripted intro videos, like very short, 1 to 3 minute, like this is what this class is, or we're entering a new unit or a new subject, here's what to expect. Those can be really great. I think also lecture videos, that's what I'll talk about in my presentation, but we want to be really intentional about how we're crafting those. And we want to, certainly lecture videos have to be, or I would suggest at least that they are shorter than a in-person lecture. And then there's also what we've been calling explainer videos, which is a lot of what people will see on YouTube, which is often using like film making techniques or even animation to really illustrate a point that you wouldn't necessarily be able to illustrate just with words and drawing on a chalkboard. You're using motion, you're using time. Here at UMass, that's something we're working towards being able to provide that sort of service animation skills we have. I think that's the most seductive type of those videos. I think it can often be more time and energy for a novice filmmaker than it is worth. And so I think sometimes even just screen recording a jazzy PowerPoint presentation, if you aren't already an experienced filmmaker or animator, can be better than spending hours and hours learning how to like zoom in from a forest to a tree.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you so much, Matt.
I would love to share a novel use that I heard about. I don't know that this is applicable to everybody, but this is a story that's captivated me. I had a chance to interview a gentleman he's a now medical doctor. He went through medical school and he was struggling with things like anatomy. You can imagine the number of terms and things that you have to learn in anatomy. And his professors were not using video. He happened to be based out of Oslo, so it was Norwegian medical school. But he decided for himself that one of the things he was going to do is practice, and he started making videos. And he said, well, I'm making these videos. I might as well put them out on YouTube just to see what happens. And now he's at a point where he actually has paused he's fully a doctor. He's paused medical stuff so he can pursue some film stuff. But what he said is what happened is he realized that as he was doing that practice, it was incredibly helpful for his learning. So there's something about that and like whether we want our students to do that all the time, I don't think it makes sense. They don't all need to start YouTube channels, but that idea that like going through the motions of also having people explain things, as you all know, is incredibly powerful. And for him, it's what worked. And the other benefit of that is now, he's got this 100,000, 200,000 people who have followed his channel because they also have found anatomy incredibly challenging, and his videos are able to help. And so, Koby, as you said, being able to pull from others' resources, reusing those, I think is valuable, right? And thinking about that process of what do we gain in the process of trying to explain something that's simple, that without, all the overhead, how do we, I love the complex film kind of creation too, but sometimes you're right. What's the simplest thing I could do to put this forward is going to be the best. And despite my desire to make really cool videos, that I get in my own way sometimes for making something that's actually much more effective.
Thank you so much. Well, we also have to discuss one really important question, because sometimes, typically people ask question, what is the current trend for video length? Should it be too long? Should it be like, I know that in 2015, 2016, there was a really big trend for micro learning, right? People were trying to make everything as short as possible. But what do you think? Should we really focus on the length of the video, or maybe think about the learning objectives and what the role of the video, what the goal of the video? Richard, what do you think?
Just to go back to that previous question for 1 second, I would say, looking at the types of video, the way I think about it is, what kind of information are we trying to get across? Sometimes it's procedural knowledge. You want to know how to do something. So demonstration videos, I think, can be really effective. Then there are more conceptual knowledge that we're trying to get across. Maybe, a recorded lecture is an example of that. And then there are, I think, we use video sometimes just to stimulate interest, build rapport, present things that we can't do with other media. So those all are slightly different functions, but the problem with all of them is, I think, video is transient. It goes by. If you're not paying attention, you miss things. It can induce a kind of passive state in people. So we want to make sure that we're priming active learning in people through our videos. But in terms of length, I think that's a really great question, that it doesn't apply just to video. When you think of how long should you lecture before you do something else? And there's all kinds of conventional wisdom. There's not a lot of great, research, unfortunately. But I think we know from research on memory that you build up what's called proactive interference in any task. The new stuff keeps coming in, and it gets mixed in with what just came before because it's similar. So it's good to release people from proactive interference by just changing what you're doing every once in a while. So I think that's a consideration. I have this thing called the segmenting principle, which says we should break a longer presentation into smaller parts, and have pauses between them and maybe activities between them. So I don't know exactly what the best length is, but
maybe there is no best, right?
There's not a great answer yet, but we know people are going to start to fade out after a few minutes.
I'll say that TechSmith has done a study. It's about viewer preference. And I want to be clear, preference does not mean effective, right? Like, people can say, I love this, and it can be totally ineffective for them. But it's been interesting. We've seen a shift over the last decade. We've done this study 5 different times, asking, and these are people in industry, like, what's your video, like for instructional and informational videos, what's your preference? And it used to be 3 to 7 minutes was the range. And this last one in 2024, it went up to like, I think 16 to 19 minutes, which shocked me. I'm like, what are people doing watching these longer videos? And I think one of the things that we did is we looked at why they were consuming a video, and that why was incredibly important. That, like, if someone in corporations, for instance, if it's a compliance training and they're like, have to do it, it's a checkbox, and they're like, just get it done, like as short as possible. But if they were interested in a topic, like there was a genuine, I want to really dig in, to maybe it's something that's going to, again, focus on their job, or maybe that's like a curiosity. I want to get better, so maybe I can find a different job or a raise or something. That's when they were willing to watch longer videos. There was typically a break point, though, that people were like, I'm not going to, if it's over 25 minutes, I'm not watching it whatsoever. I don't even want to start it. But I think there's some insight there that, again, not effective for effectiveness, but people do have some tolerance. But again, it comes back to relevance. It comes back to the idea that if I have interest or a real desire, but we can't it's hard to manufacture desire. So compliance training, you have to do this to check off the box. As short as possible. We like to say at TechSmith, as long as needed and short as possible is the best, but then take into consideration all those other factors Dr. Mayer talked about.
Yeah. Well, actually, Matt, I just like to echo Kevin's comment on YouTube. He mentions that I tell my online faculty videos should be as long as necessary, but as short as possible. And breaking up into chunks, if you can, is best. I mean, it's a really nice approach.
And one topic, I find people they're like, I just want to squeeze in one more thing. Like, it's about, if Forrest is if he's doing something on a maps on, Forrest, I don't know your area well enough to give a good analogy, I think, but instead of doing one thing, focus on one, don't focus on two things, focus on one thing. The extra stuff, that's a supplement, that's another video. And that's hard because we want to give all. Here you go, take it all.
Yeah, it has to flow and use metrics. We have all of this great viewership information, depending on platform, you can see where people are jumping to or jumping off. Use the metrics. Like, the data is there and it will help us.
Great. Thank you so much. I think we've covered all the questions for this really short panel discussion, and then we are moving to our expert presentations. But before I ask the first question to Matt, I'd really like you all participants to scan the QR code that you will see on the screen now, because we actually would like to ask you one question in one word. Can you describe the key characteristic of an engaging video? It's just one word, and we will see your responses. And I think Matt will also comment on that, and then I will ask the question. Let's wait for another 15 seconds. All right, I think we are ready to show the results. Okay, so we see here relevance, relevant, attention, emotion, demonstration, energy. That's a really great one. Hook. I agree with this one, because when you have something really one that sticks with the learning content, then people will definitely continue. They will want to continue to watch the video. Visuals, simplicity, storytelling. Matt, what do you think?
Hear me, but yeah, look, the hook is an interesting one. And again, I'm coming from maybe a different world of engagement here. But when we're talking to people about learning videos, but also social media, like, you have 5 seconds on YouTube or less to hook somebody. Now, again, that's someone's coming in looking for something versus kind of they're compelled to watch it maybe as part of a class or of a seminar. But it is really important, like, grab their attention. I mean, goes back to take video out of the equation, take technology out of the equation, and how do you bring someone into that space that they're going to want to go further with you? I think that's just it's a great insight, and I think it's one that's sometimes hard to do, but it is, I think, worth paying attention to, particularly for video, because we know the reality that people are multitasking on their devices. They've got one video up. We recently heard a story about in a corporation, someone got let go because they were trying to go through their compliance training by watching multiple videos at the same time. So people are going to do what they're going to do, but if we can bring that engagement piece in to hook them in and get them going, set them off on that right thinking of, like, hey, what does this mean? Why is this important? Whatever that might be, through story or other activity, I think that could be really valuable.
Thank you so much. Well, the question is, what are the key ingredients of an engaging video, and what key mistakes should we avoid during the video production?
Yeah. So are we going to my presentation now, or is that? Okay, perfect. First of all, thank you again for allowing me to be here. I am very humbled by to be able to share this stage with Dr. Mayer and Forrest and Koby. That they are obviously well suited to do this. So, but let's talk about engaging videos, right? Because I think with video, there's some things that we need to look at. And one of the things I want to start with is why people stop watching. I mentioned the TechSmith video viewer study. It's freely available out there. And again, it's preferences, and I want to make sure we're careful, but we did ask people why they stop watching. And one of the big reasons people stop watching, say, informational, instructional videos is they got what they needed. And that's a valid reason. It doesn't make the video bad if people don't watch all the way. Forrest mentioned we got all these great metrics you can look at. You know, if your video host or your LMS, wherever you're putting them, hopefully is giving you insights to say like, hey, how far did they get in this? But some people just stop because they got what they needed. They're able to move on, and that's okay. Another group, 25%, said the video didn't match. It didn't align with what they were looking for. Again, in a lecture, this might be a very, in a course, this might be very different. But when people are out looking for learning information, they're trying to suss out, is this going to fit with the thing that I have to learn or to do, I'm trying to accomplish? And if you're leading them with a really great title, but the video doesn't match up to what that is, that's a problem. So we want to make sure people have expectations going in, and it's going to match what they're going to get. Whew, good luck to this for everyone. If you are not consider yourself an interesting person, or you've been told that you tell a boring story, people stop watching because things aren't interesting. And that, there's a lot of reasons things might not be seen as interesting. And so that comes to that hook idea, comes to this idea of like, how do we re-engage? And you can have very complex topics, and some of them might be even dry topics, but that doesn't mean we have to approach it always in just a dry way or a boring way. And so you want to think about even simple things like the cadence of your speech, the level of your voice, the excitement that you show, or when do you pull back, and what are you doing? And there's techniques there. You don't want to be anything that you're not. You don't want to fake it, but I think you can create great ways of telling and sharing information that is a little bit more interesting. And it's a process, something that we all have to work on. Another one that I just want to focus on is people stop watching because of poor quality. I am an advocate that you always start with what you have. You don't need to go out and buy fancy gear, equipment. That often fails people because the complexity level to make it work and look better is harder than it is worth. But with what you do have, try to make good quality. And we'll talk about a couple of the things there that I think make for good quality. Particularly, it's around images, it's around audio. It doesn't have to be perfect, but you want to make sure it's not distracting someone, because if you've ever watched a video that just sounds bad, it's really hard to take in the information if it doesn't sound good. Blurriness, image quality, we can maybe get a little away with a little bit more. But for those who are older and remember the Blair Witch Project that made people sick as the camera was moving, you got to avoid stuff like that for sure. So in addition to why people stopped watching, we asked, like, what are the elements that kept them, they were thinking about a specific video. Why did they keep watching? And I think these are good. They could choose multiple options. So that's, you look at the scale there, but like, it's easy to follow along. So whatever you're presenting, make sure there's a flow. Make sure it's going to be something like, if you're doing just a simple screen share, like, are you zoomed in a little bit so it's easier to read? You don't want them to be having to struggle to figure out what you're showing, what you're doing, or why you went from this point to this point. Make sure it's just clear. Here comes that second one that's relatable and it's current. They want to know that content's it matches what they need. It's going to help them. They also want to know that it's up to date. Like, if you look at particularly software training, you're looking for something, how to do something in Excel, for instance, you want to make sure it's going to match your version of Excel, not the one previous or the one that maybe you haven't upgraded to. We got some knowledge and engagement, and you can go through and see all this, but narration quality is high and easy to hear. Again, that kind of that purpose of sound. It's unique and humorous. I'm not very good at this one, but again, you want to think about what fits you. What's your methodology? What's the way that you can, again, draw people in? And you can see some of the other stuff. We can see down here maybe some interactive elements, quizzes, faces, which is an interesting one. A lot of people like faces. From all the research I've seen, it doesn't actually impact learning per se, but there's a preference there. And, that human connection that we talked about with the AI and other things, that's important. Like, they want to see and hear from the people that are knowledgeable and expert in those things. So with the relevance question we talked about, these are just a few of the questions that I think about with relevance, that people are asking, even if it's maybe a little bit more subconsciously, right? Is it going to make me safer? I think about that a lot for job place compliance training. It's going to make me better, faster. Will this somehow give me an advantage at being happier? If I'm in a workplace or a job, is it going to allow me to move up and find, maybe more money? Just success in general. Maybe I'm not working as hard to be successful. Will get me to my desired outcome, whether that's an A in the class or, a new opportunity at my job, or maybe just, I didn't have to do that thing that I was struggling to do over and over and over because it taught me a better way. But do whatever we're doing, we want to make sure we're laying that out. And that's not just in the video. That could be in the content that surrounds the video. We often think, oh, we're going to make a video, and we just make a video. But what about the title, or what's the heading that supports that video? What's the context, that maybe description? What's the other pieces? And that relevance can feed through. You want to kind of seed that and help people to see it, because they might also not really know. I remember being a very silly kind of teenager. I was not very good at math. And I remember asking my teacher, like, why am I ever going to need to know this? Maybe some of you've asked that question. And he got mad at me for that, which I always kind of was frustrated about, because I really didn't understand, why do I need to understand this? What's it going to do for me? I didn't see myself going down that path. And so we can be good stewards of that as well. Just a couple of principles about engaging videos. The personalization principle, using your language. Cannot is very formal, but can you make it more contractions? Also the idea of personalization is it's the choice or it's your choice. Just again, helping to put them into the shoes of what they're learning. It's humanizing it. It's connecting it. It's simplifying it. Unless it needs to be very formal. And there are some cases where, terms really matter. If legal has to get involved, that's a whole different story. But you want to try and make it as personal as possible. This is one that's I found interesting, is about engaging, is just speeding up a little bit. There's a piece of research, and I believe this is, from Philip Go. He talks about basically this big study on massively open online courses that found that when instructors were speaking a little faster, that they tend to be more engaged, right? So you can speak faster, you can speak slower, but there was this point, it said in there, if you're kind of this middle rate, it's not as engaging. So you have to find ways to maybe you can speed up a little bit. Again, that's all with intention. You need to think through that, what that's going to be like for your learning audience, but you can selectively speak faster. The other reality is, understand that your viewer, they probably are not watching you at one-time speed. I like to listen to podcasts. I watch a lot of videos. I share a lot of videos at work. People share a lot of videos with me, and I watch a lot of them at 1.5 speed. One, to get through it, but two, to find it a little bit more engaging. So just another kind of easy thing that we can do to help with the engagement. It's not everything. Can't just speak faster. There is an upper rate limit, but it's something that we can definitely add on. Okay, a couple of things I want to just catch on from mistakes to avoid in your videos. First of all, are there really mistakes? Sure, there always are mistakes, but maybe we can turn them into some happy accidents like Bob Ross talked about. So here's the biggest mistake to avoid. All the ones that you can. I know that's not helpful, but the idea being is, if you're making mistakes, just try to be progressive about it, right? Avoid the ones that you know, and the ones you don't know, learn from, take feedback, and get better. But a little bit more practically, and we heard a little bit about this earlier as well, is think about your audience. Think about where they're coming from. What's the context that they're in? What's the nuance of information that maybe you expect them to understand, or they do understand? Where are they going to be viewing this? How are they going to be viewing this? When might they be viewing this? And just really consider their needs. What's going to best serve them, which is the ultimate goal. I've already mentioned it, but the biggest mistake is bad audio. Again, you don't need to go out and expend thousands of dollars, but having good audio will make a difference. There's a study, and it was really based on Newman, and I'm trying to think of the other contributor to the author, but basically they did a study, NPR. They had a podcast called Science Friday. It's a show. And they said, what happens if there's bad audio. Like a speaker calls in, a guest calls in, it's got bad audio. And so they basically did an experiment where they played back a segment with good audio, and the same person, then people got to listen to with bad audio, like really like calling in on a telephone, like an old school telephone. And they basically found the perception of the people with bad audio was lowered, that even if they were the same, it was the same thing, same level of intelligence, same kind of contribution. If they had bad audio, they're perceived as less intelligent and less capable. So for your own sake, have good audio, but for your learning, kind of reducing, I would imagine reducing cognitive load and things like that, you're going to want to make sure your audio sounds good. We mentioned this earlier as well, but just make sure one video, one topic, and then you have those secondary videos or have secondary sources of information. Even in a tutorial video, I've made a lot of tutorial videos in my career. I often found myself wanting to add one more piece of advice, one more tip, one more thing. And really what it should be is, this is how you do the thing. And if there's another way to do the thing or some alternative things that you can do, consider like, how do you want to deliver that information? It might tack on at the end just nicely, but in some ways it might be like, actually, you want to learn more, go check out this. And that way you're giving people a little bit more freedom to choose the things they want or not to choose those things before they go through that process of learning. This is a mistake. There's two things, right? Just hitting record. If you've ever made a video or a recording and you didn't hit record, you're not alone. I've done that, and it's so frustrating. I actually was at an example of that. I was in Scotland. I had this opportunity to interview someone at a football stadium, and great, beautiful setup, got the shot, great interview happened, and I forgot to hit record on my audio, and I could not use the video, and that was an expensive mistake for sure. The other thing is, I think sometimes we're afraid of recording. We don't record because, well, what if I say something that's wrong? You can edit. What if I say something and this, or what if I look weird, or what if this? We can put, I understand those are real fears, but I think the opportunity is that we can put that aside and say like, well, when I get in front of a class, they'd see me. I make mistakes. I say things. I have weird, no hair or weird hair, whatever it might be. And so I feel like it is an opportunity that we lose out when we say, I'm not going to record that because, all the reasons. There are good reasons not to record something, but don't be afraid of it. Don't be afraid of putting yourself out there. Your students know what your voice sounds like. If you don't like your voice, they know what you look like. Hopefully, it's a humanization opportunity as well. So try not to be afraid of doing it, even if it makes you nervous. Last thing here for the tips. We want to make sure that as you're going through this process of making video, let the technology help you. We talked about AI a little bit, and I'm not all in on AI as a complete replacement. I don't actually want it generating my images or the video itself, but what it can help me to get to maybe a more concise script. It can help me generate ideas. There are AI tools that are not generative. Things like we just released a tool that's a background noise removal. And so it just removes the background, and it's using AI to do that because of the machine learning and processing. And that's super helpful because like I was just at a trade show event and I recorded something that had a lot of background noise, and it made it usable audio. So let the technology help you. It's not all generative. It's not all AI, but it's there, and it does take some learning. It does take some time to process that, but can be super, super helpful. So we mentioned this viewer study. If you want to grab that, you are welcome to. No pressure. Again, it is preferences. It's not an academic report. It's looking at people who are in industry. But I find it's been informative to me to just get that perspective of what people want. You can see some of the kind of who's involved. It's not just US, folks in the US. We've got multiple countries and languages that were participating. And really, again, instructional and informational video. And then I'm going to because time-wise, I'm just going to put my information up there as well. Feel free to reach out to me. I love helping people, whatever industry, wherever you're at in academia. If you want, ask questions, follow up with things, talk to me, share ideas with me. I'd love to hear it because I want to connect folks who are trying to do video and help us to be better at it. So there we go. And I can put any of those back up if we need, Slava, but I think I'm good.
And we definitely will share this research report with all our participants. We are going to send an email with key takeaways from this seminar, and we will also link the research reports, as well as the research report that I was referring to in my introduction speech as well. Well, thank you so much for covering key ingredients for engaging video and some mistakes. Let's now go to the science mode and talk to Richard Mayer and discuss how can we minimize cognitive overload when creating educational videos, especially for complex topics. Richard, it's all over you.
Oh, thank you. I enjoyed Matt's presentation. And what I'd like to share with you is just some of the research we've been doing on trying to understand how to improve the educational effectiveness of instructional video. So here's where I live. This is the University of California at Santa Barbara. So first, just by way of introduction, I've been trying to apply the science of learning to education. This involves understanding how people learn, how to help people learn, and also determining what people have learned. So these are all things we have to do if we want to take an evidence-based approach to designing instructional video. So first step is to just understand how learning works. So here's a graphic that I like to use. The idea here is that information, in this case, an instructional video, comes in through our eyes and ears. We hold that information temporarily in a sensory memory, but that fades away very fast. We have to pay attention to that fleeting information. So that's what the selecting arrows are. We bring that into our working memory where we can organize it into some kind of a verbal representation, a verbal model. We can organize the images into some kind of pictorial model. So those are the organizing arrows. And then we can integrate the verbal and pictorial information and also integrate it with relevant prior knowledge that we activate from long-term memory. So the whole idea in effective instruction is to activate these little arrows of selecting, organizing, and integrating. When we look at instruction, the issue for us is that our working memory is very limited. We can only process a small amount of information in our visual channel and our verbal channel at any one time. If we engage in extraneous processing, then we don't have processing capacity left over for the good kind of processing. Essential gets it into our working memory. Generative helps us make sense out of it, relate it to our prior knowledge, reorganize it, things like that. So the goals of instruction should be to reduce extraneous processing, help people manage their essential processing. If we have complex material, we have to somehow help them deal with that. And then we have to foster their interest, foster generative processing to get them to process it more deeply. Here's kind of an overview of the kind of studies that we do in our lab at UC Santa Barbara. We take a base version of a lesson, so let's say an instructional video, and then we add one feature to it. So we call that the enhanced group. So we might have one version where the instructor is just talking like she usually does, another version where she's more positive, has better facial expression, more positive tone of voice, something like that. So we just vary one thing. We have them take a test, transfer test, to see how well they can use the information. And then we compute what's called effect size, which is just the difference in the scores on the test divided by the standard deviation. So in educational intervention research, we're really looking for an effect size of 0.4, which means the enhancement that we added increases people's understanding by, at least performance on a test, by 0.4 standard deviations. So those are the kind of effects I want to share with you today. So let's look at these principles. We've had the luxury in our lab of conducting hundreds of experiments where we compare the learning outcomes of students who learn from a base version of a lesson, in this case, it's a video lesson, versus the same lesson with one feature added. And I just want to share with you very briefly some of the principles. So the personalization principle has already been mentioned. So these are techniques for trying to engage people, to get them to process more deeply. The personalization principle is the idea. Well, let's just look at this. This comes from a narrated animation on how the human respiratory system works. The voice is saying during inhaling, the diaphragm moves down, creating more space for the lungs, and so on. You can see we're not very good artists. We drew these ourselves. We made the animations ourselves. If we change the wording to conversational wording, we're just changing the to your. During inhaling, your diaphragm moves down, creating more space for your lungs. We didn't emphasize it like that. We didn't use red font, but I just wanted to make that clear. What we find in 13 out of 15 experiments that we ran, that people learn more deeply when the words are in conversational style rather than formal style. Another way to maybe engage people, to get them to want to try to make sense out of the material, is what we call the embodiment principle. This is just an emerging idea in cognitive science right now, but it's the idea that we think not only with our brain, but with our whole body. So for example, I'm sitting here gesturing in front of a blank screen because it helps me to get my ideas out, I guess. One version of embodiment has to do with, let's say, a demonstration video. This is a lesson on constructing an electrical circuit. On the left, you see it's filmed from a third-person perspective. The camera is facing the person who's explaining how they're building the circuit. On the right, the camera's on his shoulder, so it's from a first-person perspective. The idea is typically in a YouTube video, it's more like a third-person perspective. But the research that we're doing shows that a first-person perspective is more effective, and possibly because you kind of feel like that's your hands creating it, you have more of a self-reference in a situation like this. Another version of embodiment, it just has to do with instructional videos where we have someone lecturing and has illustrations. So here, Celeste is lecturing about the Doppler effect, either with the graphics already drawn, or on the right, she's drawing as she's talking. Students learn better with the version on the right. Again, maybe it's because they feel like they're drawing it along with her. Also, she's kind of signaling where to look by drawing what she's talking about. Let's see. Another version of embodiment has to do with eye contact. On the left, we have an instructional video or a lecture on what was this on human kidneys. She's kind of writing on her whiteboard. She's doesn't have much eye contact with the class. On the right, she's giving the exact same lecture, same script, same drawings, but she's facing the class using technology called transparent board, where you kind of face the board, the camera is facing you, you're looking out towards the audience, and the computer transposes what you're writing. It makes a mirror image so that it looks right to the learner. So you can be having eye contact while you're writing on the board with a transparent board. Students do better on a transfer test with the version on the right when there's more eye contact. So the embodiment principle is basically the idea that people learn better when the instructor uses first-person perspective, draws while they're explaining, maintains eye contact, or I didn't show this one, gestures while they're lecturing. Okay. Another principle that I think Matt alluded to also is the voice principle. This has to do with kind of the affective features of the voice. In these studies, we're looking at a narrated animation on how lightning storms develop, for example. On the left, we have an unappealing voice. In most of our studies, that was a machine synthesized voice that still sounded machine-like, but was discernible. On the right, we have a appealing human voice that is likable. They're saying exactly the same words. We have exactly the same images, but people learn better when they're learning from a voice that they can relate to. So the voice on the right. In 5 out of 6 studies, we're getting that effect. Let's see. Another way to kind of foster generative processing, but by this I mean deeper processing, is what we call the positivity principle. So here we have a video lecture on a statistical concept, binomial probability. On the left, they both have exactly the same script, same instructor, same slides. On the left, our instructor is, she's our negative instructor. She's showing negative affect in her voice, in her gestures, in her facial expressions, and in her body stance. She happens to be a student in our drama department, so she's good at this. On the right, we have a version where she has a smiling face, eye contact, open gestures, and a much more positive voice. People learn better with the positive instructor than the negative instructor, even though the actual content is identical. We just have four experiments for this, but there's some promise for trying to keep a happy face, I guess, when you're talking to people. Emotional design principle. This is the idea. Well, let's look at this. That we can. This is from a PowerPoint presentation on, let's see, how a virus causes a cold. This is from one of the steps, step 3. We can either have the original version had black and white line drawings like on the left. On the right, we have now converted the virus into using blue color with kind of fierce facial expression, and a host cell in red color with kind of surprised facial expression. By adding color and facial expression, we're calling that emotional design. Another version of that involves converting the lesson on lightning into characters from the Disney movie Frozen. In 4 out of 4 experiments, implementing emotional design in an animation like this improves people's transfer test performance. And lastly, generative learning activity. This is the idea that, for example, on the left, we have a lesson on greenhouse gases. It has 4 different little snippets of narrated video. On the right, we have the exact same lesson, but after each segment, it stops, and we ask the learner, in this case, to engage in a generative learning activity. In this case, write down, please explain what you learned in this last clip, and you type it in for each of the 4 clips. So we're trying to get people to be a little more active, not just passively watching the lesson. Inserting generative learning activities improved learning in 37 out of our 44 experiments that we ran. So we think that's a effective technique. I'll just very briefly look at, so those are all techniques for trying to make things more engaging. Techniques for trying to reduce distraction. The main one I want to focus on is this one called coherence. On the left, this comes from a lesson on, again, how a virus causes a cold. On the left, we've added interesting but irrelevant facts. In this case, we did a kind of pre-study, and UCSB students thought this fact, a study conducted in Pennsylvania reveals that people make love once or twice a week are more immune to colds than folks who abstain. That was the number 1 most interesting fact for our students. So when we put this into our study, adding that greatly reduced their learning of the lesson. They were less able to really understand how a virus causes a cold. So in 18 out of 19 tests, our idea is to take out extraneous material, and that improves learning. And I'll just give you one more example. Oh, I guess I'll give you this example. Another technique for helping people focus on the information is to signal where to look. So if we have a lecture, we can either have the instructor just stand still next to the graphic, or she can point to the part of the graphic she's talking about. This lesson is explaining neurotransmission, but it's in Chinese, so it's a little hard to follow for some of us. The signaled version results in better transfer test performance in 26 out of 28 studies. So I am out of time, but I'll be glad to talk about any of this if anybody has any further questions.
I really enjoyed one of the principles where you not only have to watch the video, but you have to reflect, because this way it provides the opportunity to think why I was watching the video and what key element I learned. Because, in most cases, what I notice, let's say if you go to different online platforms, when you pay money for online courses, you just watch videos and just move on. And then they ask you like 15 questions during the quiz, and you have to think about that, but then it's really difficult to concentrate. So really great principle. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Another important feature that we can use in videos is a story. Each video has a story and should have a story. And now we just need to understand how to create this story, right? And how can storytelling be leveraged to enhance video-based learning, and how can it be effectively incorporated into the script? And Koby can help us to understand that. Koby, it's over you.
All right, hello. I'm Koby Leff. I'm the animation specialist here at UMass Amherst in instructional design, engagement, and support. Our video department within Ideas is relatively new. We're working to support instructors in various ways to create high quality, sometimes animated videos for their courses, either through DIY workshop series and seminars like this, or some more hands-on support. So please, if you're an instructor at UMass and interested, tune in to our programs to see future offerings and ways we can support you. I'm going to give a brief talk about how we can turn lectures into engaging videos, as Slava mentioned, leveraging some storytelling techniques. So for starters, as we've sort of begun to talk about already in this seminar, different media have different strengths. Video is not identical in its powers to a synchronous course, but it's by no means lesser. So, in a synchronous lecture, we have minimal distractions. Our students are very focused in person, and we don't have to think too much about the linear narrative of our course content, because student questions can help guide it. We can call on them and sort of redirect the order we were planning on presenting information to match their needs. Video, in contrast, first of all, while our students might be more distracted competing with the rest of the internet, they also are able to view videos on demand. They can really wait until they're in the right headspace. And if we have short chunks, as we talked about earlier, then students can, do the dishes, go for a walk in between videos, and really have time to process. And building off of that, if we use focused storytelling techniques and really convey small chunks of large ideas in short videos, then those topics might be more memorable to students than if they had to digest, 5 or 10 of them over the course of an hour-and-a-half lecture, right? They can really sit with this individual chunk and really let it sink in. And so just the takeaway is we can optimize our lessons for the medium of video to better support remote learning and student engagement, right? So we can just record a lecture from a synchronous course and post it to the internet, but I'd like to suggest that that is not ideal, and that we should really think about catering our asynchronous video content specifically to the medium. In the interest of time, I won't spend too much time on this slide since we've talked about it a lot earlier. Um, but basically, we want to keep our videos short because completing a video for our students fosters a sense of progression and motivation, right? Rather than returning to, chunks of an hour long or even a 30-minute long video. If our students can watch short little chunks, they can feel like, okay, I really accomplished something for the course, and that will make them want to pick it up again. Uh, to reference the TechSmith video viewer study that Matthew's been talking about, they saw, nearly 2/3 of respondents said videos over 20 minutes are too long. So we'll try to go shorter than that in our lecture videos. Also, students are accustomed to shorter video content. We want to align with their existing habits, and we're competing for their attention with the rest of the internet. So let's really hit them with a short, meaningful video and then allow them to be distracted and then return to the content when they're ready to focus again. We're going to be thinking about segmenting, as Dr. Mayer was talking about. Really, what I want to suggest is that professors who've only taught synchronous courses and might be moving to online courses for the first time, we really are already practiced in telling stories and taking our learning objectives and chunking them up into the beats of a story, right? So when we're designing any course, whether or not we're explicitly thinking about this, we have semester-long learning objectives that we want our students to absorb by the end of the semester. But we can't just throw all of that at them at once, right? We need to chunk this up into subtopics. So each lecture is sort of taking a subtopic that serves our overall semester learning objectives. And the reason I have arrows on this graphic is that each lecture naturally builds off the previous, right? So at the start of a course, we're introducing just very simple foundational information. And as the course goes on, we're introducing increasingly complex information that builds off of the previous ideas. And so this is how storytelling works, right? We introduce characters, and at first, our audience, our students, are just getting to know them. But as they grow accustomed to them, as they see them interact with each other and in different situations, we can do increasingly complex things with them. And after a little while, just referring to a topic or a character by name will implicitly pack a lot of information into our statements. Well, as the first time we're bringing up a topic, there's still a lot of unknowns for our students. And so really, when we take these lectures and adapt them into online videos, we're doing a very, very similar process to chunking up our semester-long learning objectives into lectures, right? So let's pretend that a lecture is 45 minutes normally. Then when we adapt that into a series of videos, we'll want to do 3 15-minute videos, for example, right? We could also do, 4 shorter videos. And of course, if you had an hour-and-a-half lecture, you might be looking at 6 15-minute videos and so on. But the idea basically, again, is just that we want to kind of create this linear flow of the information. We want to think about, okay, what are the learning objectives we want our students to leave this overall lecture with? And then what are the sort of scaffolded building blocks that will give them that information, right? What's the simplest thing that they need to know? And then slowly we can build on that with increasingly complex information. And so now we're going to examine sort of breaking down a single video, which we can segment even further using narrative structure techniques, thinking about like the beginning, middle, and end of a story, right? So we want to start our video with a hook, with a compelling question or a challenge or misconception to really draw our viewers in, draw our students in, get them excited to watch the video, set expectations for what the video will be, let them know which page of their notebook they want to turn to, really adjust their focus. We don't want to have twists and turns where halfway through the video, they're like, oh, now I know what I'm learning about. We want to let them know right away so they can really have focused attention. And then the middle of our video is going to have sort of self-contained points that are very specific to this video chunk. And so what I mean by that is, as we go through the linear progression of various videos, it will be really easy for students to connect back to the major ideas that concluded previous videos. It will be harder for them to remember fine-grained specifics that came up in the middle, right? So if we're, for example, making a video about a mathematical principle, we might, it might be very easy for students to remember sort of the purpose of that principle and its function. It might be harder for them in future videos to remember the exact equation or where pieces of that equation came from. So the middle of the video is really the place to share that information that we don't necessarily expect our students to immediately remember when they watch the next video, right? They can reference this video, before the test. By no means is this throwaway information, but we really want to end the video with the most memorable and transferable idea, right? So whatever note we end on, and likely if we started with a question, this is sort of the answer to the question. This is what's going to be salient in students' minds when they start up the next video segment. So any big picture ideas that will really be important throughout the class is what we want to end on. And that's also a great sort of signpost for when we want to make a new video, right? If we're like, oh, well, in this video, there's 3 major takeaways, 3 major subtopics that I want to make sure my students remember throughout this series of videos. Well, then maybe that's actually 3 short videos. And when we hit on that major topic, it's time to make a new one. We really want to reinforce the takeaway of the video. So kind of putting that all together, we're starting by capturing students' attention. Then we're giving them, very fine-grained, detailed information. And then we're sort of ending with a big picture summary that will be very easy for them to remember in future videos. And in future videos, of course, you can say, now in video 2, we talked about such and such. You might even, play a clip from it, remind them of specific things. But we really want to end on the key idea. We can also end on a call to action, now think about how this applies to your life, or here's some wonderful thing you can do with this information. That might really motivate them to continue through the course, right? So if it's a zoology course, maybe you have a veterinary student and you end by reminding them how learning this idea that you just taught them will be crucial to their future career as a vet. The one thing I want to share there is try not to make your calls to action specific to a semester, right? So don't tell them to do an assignment that you might not utilize again. That way we can have these sort of big picture videos be reusable across different semesters, and we can spend as much time as possible on these scripted, narratively structured videos. When we do want less scripted, more improvisational videos, maybe to answer a commonly asked question or introduce an assignment, there is definitely a great advantage in less formal, less scripted videos. And to tell you more about that, I will turn it over to my colleague, Forrest. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Koby. The good thing what you described today during your presentation is how to implement storytelling in, I would say, formal learning videos, right? And with our next speaker, we will discuss kind of informal interactions between professor and students. And I'd like to ask this question to Forrest. How do you incorporate elements of student to professor interactions from your synchronous courses into your asynchronous video materials?
That's a great question, and I'm happy to talk about that more in depth. But the quick answer is I don't use any scripts. So all the videos that I make for my courses, for my YouTube page, which I'll share the information for at the end, all of that is unscripted, things I've done plenty of times, but the students haven't done. And it's really useful for me, and I think for them, to see how the whole process works in a way that has the chance, and occasionally does, go off the rails a little bit. So my name is Forrest Bowlick. I'm a senior lecturer in Geographic Information Science and Technology here at UMass. My big teaching load The primary course that I'm responsible for is a course in Introduction to GIS. In pretty much any mode you can think of. When students ask, can I take your course, and then something comes, some special situation, the answer is always yes. My students are live in person, they're live on video, on Zoom. They are asynchronously watching things. They are catching up on recordings. They are working in all kinds of combinations. I don't have due dates. I have a structure that is very sequential, and it works because I build an environment where students can access the information and the knowledge that they need on demand, and in a way that serves them when they are ready to do the work and do the learning. That's what I emphasize in all of my classes. If any students are listening, they've heard me say that plenty of times. And what do the students need? What do the learners need in my GIS course or in a GIS course in general? I've been toting this graphic of mine around since my dissertation defense days, and you might recognize it from your learning environments as well. Students need a theoretical basis. They need to understand the workings of why and how things like the Earth's rotation or turning a 3D globe into a map, how those operate. They need a technical practice. They need to do the things. They need to hit the buttons. And they need to create stuff. Just pushing the buttons isn't any fun if you don't make something with it. And in all of those, they're going to need help. They need to troubleshoot. They need to work through a bug, an issue. They clicked the wrong thing. The software just doesn't work. All of these things happen to me and in my expert status, and it happens to them in their novice status as well. And guess what? The novices haven't had the practice or the experience of overcoming the barriers. And these are some of the barriers here in my little flow chart. There's no start, there's no finish. You are always going around this cycle forever and ever. And as you build expertise, as you learn more, you can build in yourself strategies and ways to get around these, ways to overcome these. But if you're learning how to do it, you probably need some assistance, some help, some ways of getting over these things. Though I like to say that the GIS lab is not competitive in our environment, except for who gets the good snacks first out of the snack box. That's definitely the most competitive thing. So what solutions have I found over the years? Well, it's examples, going through specific things they need to do. Either that's the assignment in the lab activity, or it's something they're going to need to do for the thing they produce or their project that they do. They need pathways. They need to understand why I'm making decisions, why they might make a decision, to then solve or remove the barrier. Sometimes removing the barrier is getting right through it and it just goes away. Sometimes it's going down the different pathway. And over there is where the actual solution is, and we don't even need to worry about that barrier. This builds in them capacity. They can start to build an understanding and skills and practices to overcome things. And all at the same time, we're discussing, we're asking questions, we're practicing how to ask questions and how to respond to them, and we're having fun. That's the GIS stance right there. We're all having fun at the end of the day in the GIS class. And guess what? All of these solutions can be videos, and all these solutions make for excellent videos. And sometimes it's which north arrow are you going to pick? They're both good. I pick the one on the right. And sometimes it's a question you might not want to ask in class, but if you send it to my email, I just might make a video. And then guess what? A bunch of other people are going to have an answer to the question too. So my videos follow these general strategies. I'm going to talk about these each more in a little bit of depth, with that emphasis on short, simple, no time for scripts, and demonstrating what it's actually like to do the things, what it's actually like to click the buttons, make the decisions, and also make the mistakes. So the classroom's everywhere. Someone could be learning GIS right now in any of these videos, and they are in my classroom or in the learning mode. These are a few highlights from my GIS playlist. They're shorter. They're under 10 minutes in general. The students love to watch me do GIS, which I sometimes find surprising. It's not the way I want to learn, but they love watching it. They don't want to watch it forever, though. So I make these based on the workflow of our labs, our assignments, based on what I know people struggle with, and based on what the students tell me they're struggling with. Or maybe not struggling, but Could you show us that again? If anyone's ever taught a technical class, could you show us that again? Absolutely. Well, here's the again as many times as you need it. These then become short and simple. They're connected to expectations. They're easily digestible, and they're in multiple formats. This is a screenshot from one of my labs, and it shows the section, map projections, one of the toughest labs we have. It summarizes what we're doing. We're doing something called a reprojection. It connects them to learning standards. This is the geospatial technology competency model. That's what all those numbers are. And all that means is, here's how these things that you're doing will actually be connected to real world tasks you will do in the workforce, in research, so on and so forth. If you look up the GTCM, it looks like a big scary pyramid, so I call it the Pyramid of Doom. Then there's a link to the video walkthrough. So this is where the walkthrough of this section is, and then it goes into the lab proper. I do these all of my recordings, all of my walkthroughs of the labs, like that example, what used to be referred to as live to tape. If you've ever watched The Tonight Show, I'm not sure if anyone watches The Tonight Show anymore, but live to tape. You're live, you're there. It'll be broadcast later on. It can be edited if it needs to. And occasionally I film these, before a live studio audience, in which case that's my students. They want to see me do the things. Well, now everyone can see me do them. I'm not going to be perfect. I'm never perfect when I do these, but the mistakes I make or the issues that come up are things that they're going to make. They're going to make the mistakes. They're going to have those issues. So it's essential for the learning experience to capture those. I want to capture all the things that go up and down, left and right, successes and failures. And in my life, I've really been inspired by streamers doing this. Go to Twitch sometime. Pick a streamer, pick someone who's got a lot of viewers and has a really active chat. Turn on the language filters if you're sensitive to those, and listen to what the streamers are talking about, how they're doing. They are talking about the decisions they're making and whatever kind of game they might be playing. They are interacting with questions from the chat. Why'd you do that? Why'd you do this? They're explaining how things work, especially if it's a new game. Oh, I need to, find this many crystals to upgrade this and that. They're reacting to what the chat is doing. They're making jokes with them. They're making memes. They're having fun. That's good in streaming a game and in teaching students to have this engaging, fun, interactive component. It makes it more fun. It makes it more accessible. And of course, streamers make mistakes. They don't always win their matches, but they talk about what happened. Well, my GIS tool doesn't always work the first time. So if that happens, I'm going to talk about why. Then the students can learn and see why they did that. Oh, it didn't run. I have a space in the file name. No spaces in file names. Let's rerun it and make sure we fix that mistake. Sometimes the mistakes are intentional because I know what the students are going to do. So I might as well encourage them and connect with them and say, oh yeah, I do that too. And that adds to that pile of student needs. I like to call when I start off some of my videos, I say, we had a question come into the lovely GIS question pile, which is my email. And the question asked this. It responds to the student's need. It gives me an idea of what people are asking for. And when I say students, they don't have to be in my classroom. I respond to YouTube comments all the time. Great questions, great engagements there. And then we walk through the scenario. Then we talk about what we're doing, why we're doing it, and we create it in a way that makes things as accessible and engageable as possible. Then the next time I get that question in the student GIS email inbox, I can say, oh yeah, I made a video about that. Here it is. And they have it set, ready to go. So that's the quick overview of my GIS instructional strategy. This presentation too was completely unscripted, so hopefully it went pretty well. You can connect with me via email, my YouTube page, youtube.com/@freelancegeographer. Go like and subscribe, as they say. And any questions you have, feel free to reach out.
Thank you so much for it. We actually, yes, we will include your channel to our key takeaways email so that our audience can see this example of how to create kind of unscripted videos. I just want to go back just in case people have questions. and we can summarize this with you and Matt. And Richard, feel free to join us as well. People might ask the question, so what do you mean? We don't have to script videos before we record them? In what cases should we create scripts, and when, we can skip that?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think that, in my case, when I'm going through a walkthrough, when I'm going through some kind of demonstration of a tool or a process, that's the script for me, is that I know I need to do A and then B and then C to make the tool run, and then I can react or plan to react if it doesn't run a certain way. So in some ways, the script is obvious enough that I don't need one.
Mhm.
I would definitely script out, and I have for some of my theoretical lectures. I have my lectures up on YouTube as well. And when I know I need to, either based on my experience or the research-based evidence or what it might be, when I know I need to talk about, this part, this part, this part, and projections, again, I could talk about teaching map projections for hours, I think. You have to establish certain skills. You have to have a certain base before you can go on to the next thing. And for us, we've done it. I've talked about projections plenty of times, but it's an essential reminder for me to say, okay, for someone new, let's ground and build from there.
Thank you. Oh, Matt, you muted.
Oh, thank you. I'll just add that I think one of the things is when you want control of the message for whatever reason, because you want it's complex or you've got a certain way you need to say stuff, that's a great time to script. I think when you have built up a level of expertise, and I think Forrest is a great example of this, you can go less without a script, but you do have trade-offs there, right? Because it will be filled with maybe your ums and your ahs or your other things, and that's okay. But I think, you think about that control for a script, you think about when you want to make something concise. I think it was, they've attributed a quote to Mark Twain. He said, "I did not have time to write you a long letter, or a short letter, so I wrote you a long letter instead." And I think that's the thing about videos is I often find, I think, oh, this is going to be 1 minute. I'll just record it. And then I've spoken for 3. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I should have just written something down. So I think there's lots of reasons you script, but there are times it's perfectly acceptable. I think it's also very natural to, if you just speak off the cuff, and that can be engaging because it can be real, it can be human, which you don't get, again, tying back to the AI stuff, is it might add a bunch of stuff that you don't need or just doesn't sound real.
Yeah. And I also think that scripting will also help you to kind of think about Richard Mayer's principles, because most of what Richard mentioned today will require to think ahead of time, right? When to point or when to think about the reflection questions. So that's why scripting is critical in some cases.
Although I would say kind of the social cues that you want to put into a video that would build rapport with the students, you can't really script those. You can't script gestures and tone of voice. That it's just a natural part of communication.
I agree. Thank you so much. Well, dear participants, time flies as usual. It's 3:33 p.m. in Massachusetts. The only one thing that I have to say before we finish our seminar is I'd like you to scan this QR code, because we'd like to hear from you. We'd like your feedback. We are definitely going to continue to host these seminars. The next one is going to happen in April, and we will definitely let you know. But your feedback will help us to analyze today's event and see how we can improve our future events. So if you can spend some time and answer really quick for questions, that will be great. So you can scan the QR code. We are sharing this on the screen now. And just once again, thank you so much for being with us today. We hope you found this seminar useful, and see you next time.